A man once told me the story about when right before he was going to get married, he went to his mother and he asked for her advice. How we've been married 60 years now to Dad. What was the secret? He said his mother just paused for a very long time and said back, "Pay attention." That is one lesson I think that we can get from today's celebration of the presentation of Jesus in the temple. The need to pay attention to God's coming in our lives. The presentation of Jesus in the temple is actually one of the most historic moments in the life of Israel. And to know what's going on today, you have to know a little bit about the history. In the Old Testament, the glory of God was first revealed by his presence as he led Israel, as he led them out of Egypt. He appeared to Moses in the burning bush. He appeared to them in a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. He nurtured Israel in the desert with food and water. And after 400 years after they had entered in the promised land, did he allow them to build a temple so that his glory could be revealed. And whenever they talk about his glory, they're talking about his presence. The presence of God is his glory. And so it was that Solomon completed the temple in the year 960 BC. And we're told that the glory of the Lord blessed the house by filling it with his own presence. Then almost 500 years later, though, the people had become so corrupt, especially the priests, that God appeared to Ezekiel, the prophet of that time. And he said, "Look at what my priests are doing. They're offering abominations in my own temple." They were doing acts of idolatry. They turned it into sort of a marketplace. And they allowed many other gods to come into the temple. So God said, "Come to the temple and I will show you a vision," to Ezekiel. And Ezekiel goes before the temple and he sees the glory of the Lord, the presence of the Lord coming to the front. And this is what he writes. "Then the glory of the Lord departed from the threshold of the temple and stood over the cherubim that hovered above. And the cherubim lifted their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight. When they went out, they stood at the door of the east gate of the Lord's house. And the glory of the God of Israel was above them. And he departed from sight." See, so that's why the presentation of Jesus is so important, because for the past 500 years of their history now, from about 500 BC until the present, when Jesus comes in, it was understood that the glory of God had left the temple. This was right before the Babylonian exile. So then the temple's destroyed. And so finally in this time, they're building up the temple, but it's empty. They recognize that the presence of God is not there. And so in this most momentous event in their history, when God finally comes back into the temple to reclaim it for himself, to reveal his presence, at the same time, the greatest tragedy occurs. Nobody recognizes it. How many thousands of people were in the temple at that moment? How many hundreds of priests were there praying? And yet how many people recognized the entrance of God back into his temple? Just two. Simeon and Anna. And why? Because they were paying attention. With both of them, the scripture says that they were strictly awaiting God's coming with prayers and fasting and vigils, hoping and living in the Spirit, being attentive and waiting for that moment to come. There are examples to us to stay vigilant. God is seen only by those who are watching for his coming. And it says something even more about our own life. One thing I've really come to see is you get what you look for. If you're looking for evil in the world, you're going to find it. If you're looking for evil in the church, you're definitely going to find it. But if you're looking for the presence of God in your life, if you're looking for the miraculous ways that God is working and showing himself, revealing himself in your life, in your family, in the church, you're going to find that too. But you have to look for it. We will always find what we look for if we're paying attention. There was only a minority, a small minority, who recognized Christ coming then. There's still only a minority who recognize his coming now. It's the way of the world. It's John 1 from the very beginning. It says, "The true light who gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him." How blessed are we, if you really put us in the context of this entire world, that you all came here on a Saturday morning. You sacrificed anything else you could be doing right now to come to the Lord. Why? Because you recognize his coming, and you want to be there to receive him. And that's exactly what's going to take place in one moment on this altar. For those who are attentive, for those who are watching, they will recognize the coming of God, not in the form of flesh of a child, but in the form of bread and wine. To those who are paying attention to that miracle and receive him in that way, they will never be short. They will never miss the ways that God is continually coming and manifesting himself in our world, in our lives, and in our church, even today.